This was posted May 13th, Friday the 13th of all dates. And that's another thing too that I noticed is the date numerology that all of these events are lining up on. There was a lunar eclipse, I believe, either last night. Yeah, it was last night. Okay. At the end of it all, at the end of this whole thing, we get a lunar eclipse and a blood moon. And now we have a bear market. And if this thing starts to pump for no reason in the following week, I don't need any more convincing. But Friday, May 13th, right? This is when the proposal for a class action lawsuit, it's time for some legal measures. This was posted in the Terror Research Forum. That's the link, of course, that I provided for us in the community tab where people can go and contribute, voice their opinions, so forth and so on. But this particular posting is on Anchor's forum. All right. A lot similar, but it's on Anchor's forum. And not a lot of people are talking about how Anchor is involved. Okay. But the people over at Anchor are talking about how Anchor was involved. Let's just start reading through this, guys, because almost every sentence is just heavy. So people like Quan, that's the only way they learn. Sad but true. I've been saying for months that for Terra to work and be a success, they need to dump Quan. Sadly, it was not a real company. It had no effective board. If it did, Quan would have been dumped a long time ago. It's obvious for a long time that he was a major liability to Terra as a whole. Quan ran Terra unopposed with no checks and balances in place and his own little fiefdom while publicly acting like a jackass, taking on reckless danger and clearly having not the faintest clue of the legal fiduciary duty that he had to the holders of his unregistered security and the depositors. No probe is definitely one part of it. Hopefully he gets extradited to the US and spends the rest of his life in jail where he belongs. And it's very strong words here, guys. But what the community really needs is an intentional major law firm to take on a civil case for fraud, embezzlement, unjust enrichment, and everything else that went on, and to pursue that in whichever jurisdictions, be it Korea, the US, or Singapore, where there's the best chance to bring Quan to account and get a court order to seize all of his and his relatives' assets and his enablers at the TFL and the LFG, who are also complicit in this, at the very least as willing accomplices. Sure, the law firm will make the most, but Quan learned a lesson and he's going to find out on the streets. Now, again, very strong words, guys, very strong words, but he mentions how there needs to be an international major law firm to tackle this case. Wouldn't you know it, that there is currently being formed right now a global regulatory crypto body that is going to be built to handle these types of situations. Problem, reaction, solution. Boy, we humans are a very colorful bunch, aren't we? But let's jump down to the piece that broke my heart. Well, first, we're going to get to his next post, okay? And then we're going to get to the heartbreaker. This second piece is explaining even deeper the institutions and the venture capital money that came into Terra Luna. But in addition to TFL, LFG, and their enablers, that includes all of the board members of TFL, LFG, and all the VCs who backed them. That is who you want to go after, the deep pockets, Quan, TFL, LFG, of course, but where most of the recovery may be had will be had from the VCs who have hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars on hand, literally. They profited from it. Maybe all of Jump Capital can be wound down and its assets sold and distributed to the victims, or maybe just their gains and profits made from Terra. Same for other VCs involved who are all complicit in this and are certainly co-conspirators and were part of the fraud. Their and the board's duty was to oust Quan and expose this, take appropriate risk mitigation measures, but they egged him on and supported him down the reckless path instead. Not the VC company, then at least the individuals from it who participated in the TFL or the Luna Foundation Guard decision-making governance and had the inside info. Okay, now Now we're going to get to this is where he proposes the global law firm, but we covered that. But let's get to the heartbreaker, guys. Now, my heartbreak comes from 8bytes. Man, oh boy. But 8bytes was this, he apparently, he or she, they were building on Terra right before this happened. But what I want to share with you is what they believe would be directly tied to any litigation in this case. The story goes that back in September and November last year, the Terra Foundation, Terra Luna Labs, Luna Foundation Guard, and Doe partnered with Abra. They partnered with Abra to drive up artificial demand for US Terra. They burned Luna to mint hundreds of millions of US Terra to prop up the protocol total value lock. This was deposited in liquidity pools on Curve, and partnerships were formed between Abra, TFL, LFG, and Curve Finance. Partnerships were formed to promote US Terra with Abra, Terra Foundation, the Luna Guard, and Curve Finance. Oh, let's keep going. LFG accumulated US Terra via this burning mechanism by burning a little Luna at a very high rate. Basically, this started incurring Luna shareholder debt without telling them, as most likely time for that stablecoin to be redeemed is when Luna was at a lower price. And they used US Terra money to purchase Bitcoin on spot market or over the counter, etc., accumulating up to the tune of 80,000 Bitcoin. Not $80,000, 80,000 Bitcoin. Guys, we only have 2 million left. There are only 2 million Bitcoin left. And if we're seeing these types of moves being made with them, wait, trust me, when we get to, we still got more to go. But this released the US Terra that was issued at high Luna values into the market. Value was transferred to Luna Foundation Guard while the debt was offloaded to unsuspecting BTC sellers. This Terra eventually found its way onto Anchor via a variety of means on a US Terra from other protocols, just unsuspecting people trading USDC for Tether to get Terra to deposit on Anchor, etc. That was the plan from the start, because if it got to Anchor, it wouldn't have been seen as a debt. That is very, very crucial, because from a legal standpoint, guys, once they moved it to Anchor, that also included Anchor and all of the holders of Anchor, all the people who were using the platform. So it dramatically expanded the list of potential suspects that would have had to have been gone through in order for any prosecution to ever fall on Do Kwon. Okay, that is why he said this was the plan from the start, to move it onto the Anchor platform. Once it got moved to the Anchor platform, it was essentially a wash. And when we think about the proposals that they are looking to institute, and one of them being to automatically reset the blockchain, if they did that, that would make everything that happened irrelevant, completely irrelevant. Okay. And then, of course, once that started to happen, then we lead into what all went down with the Anchor protocol. Them losing $7 billion in a matter of 24 hours. It was just, it was too much. It was just all too much. We had money being moved illegally, and it was putting pressure on the algorithm. And then you have 100,000 people making transactions completely unaware of what's really going on. So they're not, tapering their transactions with awareness of things not necessarily being right, because we saw earlier the tweet from someone who was watching the Anchor on-chain data. There was no evidence of this happening, but at the same time, it was happening behind the scenes. Since we're on the subject of class action lawsuits, I discovered that the SEC already knows Do Kwon, and they've known him very well. So the SEC has already sued Terraform Labs, and it has every reason to investigate US Terra. Now, this is quite the lengthy article, but the short of it is this: the Securities and Exchange Commission is likely already investigating what happened to US Terra over the past week, two former SEC lawyers told The Block. The SEC is already on the scene as they are investigating the Mirror Protocol, said Philip Mutakis, who left the SEC's enforcement division for law firm Seward Kissel in 2019. In conversation with The Block, a spokesperson for SEC told them that the SEC does not comment on the existence or non-existence of a possible investigation. Regulator also declined to comment on Terra USD. Now, what we have learned from this whole XRP Ethereum situation, guys, is that the SEC is full of SEC, okay? And the status of, and what they're saying right here, guys, we already know. But what is important is the status of stablecoins in U.S. regulatory framework, okay, which is the subject of great debate. This is when we start to see that the regulations towards stablecoins are a very crucial element towards this. This event had to happen in order for people like the SEC, CFTC, Janet Yellen to have enough ammunition to get the right initiatives behind them. Something else that we will see a little bit later in this video, guys, because this stablecoin narrative is not just here in the US. All right. There is another regulatory movement happening right around where Terra Luna is really homed at, which is South Korea. Before we get into South Korea, guys, just want to show you again, this is a Twitter thread from 4484 and link will be down in the episode guide. But what he's going to go through is the steps. Okay, what exactly happened? Now, we already know that Anchor was involved with this, and so was Curve Finance. We know that Curve Finance and Abra, oh my lord, Luna Foundation and the Terra Foundation, they created this partnership in the middle of, November of 2021. Now, let's read through what he describes here, what 4484 describes, and I want to see if you guys can see what I saw. So he starts 10 minutes after LFG pulled some liquidity from Curve in preparation for the 4 pool, or that UST Terra plus 3 pool. The attackers pounced. First, they cleared all the liquidity from Curve, needing just 350 million US Terra to do that. Then they started dumping their UST onto Binance, creating the small DPEG. Terra market module configured for 150 million daily throughput for peg restoration would be enough if liquidity on Curve was intended 4 billion instead of 350 million. People in a small panic because BTC was tanking and small UST DPEG. So Luna started selling BTC to restore the peg. That's exactly what the attackers wanted because they shorted Bitcoin. LFG started dumping Bitcoin while the attackers put pressure on by dumping US Terra. So what he's saying is that the people who are involved, they were holding the Terra. They were holding control of the Terra. And while Luna Foundation was dumping the Bitcoin reserves that they had accumulated to support their stablecoin, the people who were holding the stablecoin, which they sold, they were just pulling it away. So we had people dumping Bitcoin and pulling the US Terra out the way at the same time. So the more BTC sold lower, the more BTC tank, increasing panic, the more UST sell pressure the attackers needed. Finally, mass panicking and mismatch congestion hit the chain. Centralized exchanges suspend withdrawals and hit the fan. A bank run on Anchor. Jump and LFG realized what's happening somewhere in the middle of their BTC reserves and stop dumping BTC to save the peg and let it burn. No peg is being restored naturally via the market module. Rumors about big deals made during the night. All of this would not be economically viable if the 4 pool was live, because clearing the 4 pool alone will require 3 billion instead of 350 million. The timing was not a coincidence. So further evidence, guys, there were so many different players involved, but I got some more for you. This is courtesy of J. Canfield. Rumor number 1, Citadel is the culprit. They borrowed 100K BTC, traded, and I want to emphasize here, 100K BTC, that was 100 100,000 Bitcoin, not $100,000 worth, 100,000 of the actual coin. They traded 25K of that for Terra. Opens a short, starts dumping 75,000 Bitcoin aggressively. Once Bitcoin reached 30K, that's when they flipped the switch into Terra, which made it lose its peg. Now, Quan was forced to sell 25 BTC at a major loss to recover the peg, further dumping the price of BTC. Meanwhile, Citadel is shorting all the way. Now, of course, they came out. They were one of the ones that came out and stated that, no, this is not true. We had nothing to do with this. But let me take you over to the digital mercenary. Okay. And the first posting is from Crypto Whale. And this is something this is only slightly hit it on. But he says around 8:03 a.m., Tether tanked 99% to a penny on CoinMarketCap, Bitfinex, and Binance, where CoinMarketCap is always having some issues. But by 8:57 a.m., a little less than an hour later, they scrubbed the US Terra crash and the USD Tether crash and pretended it never happened. Too bad he recorded it on the blockchain. Well, it will always live forever, guys. And we can see we got the screenshots there. And we go further, guys. You can kind of see where we got some of the other information in the video. But this is the haymaker. Doe had nothing to do with this. This was a deliberate hit. Now, let's read through this because it really explains how this deal went down. But BlackRock, Citadel borrowed 100K Bitcoin from Gemini. It appears in their loan book. They swapped 25,000 of that BTC into US Terra. This was all done quietly with anticipation of the attack. When the time was right, they called up Do Kwon at the Terra Foundation and said that they wanted to sell a lot of BTC for US Terra as it was a large trade. And they told him they didn't want to move the market and asked if he would like to buy their large block of Bitcoin at a discount for Terra. Do Kwon took the bait. He gave them a huge chunk of US Terra, thus lowering the UST liquidity significantly. That would probably explain that initial dip that we learned about that occurred on May 5th, where we cracked down 40%, but quickly recovered. Now, he took the bait. He gave them a huge chunk of US Tether, lowering the liquidity. At that point, BlackRock Citadel dumped all of the Bitcoin and US Tether, causing massive slippage and triggering a cascade of forced selling in both assets. The real problem was BlackRock Citadel knew that Anchor, which holds a lot of Luna, was a Ponzi scheme, which offered 20% staking APY. Yeah, I told you guys, high APYs, don't even let it fly. But this crash would trigger more withdrawals than Anchor can repay. These forced withdrawals and selling would trigger a massive sell-off in Luna, thus further breaking the $1 peg and wrecking the market further. BlackRock and Citadel can now buy the BTC back cheaply to repay the loan and pocket the difference. Meanwhile, billions of longs and Bitcoin VAR were virtually wiped out. Pure market manipulation. Now, first thing I want to mention off top, guys, we talked about this. BlackRock and USDC Circle. They put all of their money into there. Okay. They are taking control of part of the reserves alongside the digital currency group, as well as the Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation, which is also known as the DTCC. And of course, guys, they hit Forbes, which they also own. And they said, yeah, we didn't do this. But literally last month, you did this same thing with USDC Circle. Okay. And that's another thing that I'm seeing too, guys. Terra was a main competition and it would have been effective competition to USDC Circle. So they had to get it out of the way. Now, to get even deeper, oh boy, I told you I was going to put it all on the floor in this video, guys. So this is coming from Australia, news.com.au. And what we have here is an interview with the CEO of Digital X, Lisa Wade. Now, she describes this as being an exploitive trade. Now, let's get into it.